In the heart of the Philippines, Private First-Class Dirk J. Vlug was waging his war against Japanese tankers. Vlug's buddies guarded a roadblock, threatened by 2 enemy tanks. Undeterred by the enemy armor, Vlug emerged from his fortified position with a rocket launcher and a mere 6 rounds of ammunition. Completely alone and exposed, the private advanced under a barrage of machine guns and 37mm fire. Swiftly, Vlug dispatched the first tank with a single round, turning it into a pile of rubble and fire. Undaunted, the private confronted the dismounting crew of the second tank, using his M1911 pistol to eliminate them, forcing the survivors to retreat to the safety of their tank, only to find themselves consumed by the explosion of a direct hit. Taking a deep breath, Vlug reloaded his weapons and prepared for a more significant threat. Through the smoke and fire, the American GI sighted 3 more Japanese tanks. Vlug grabbed his bazooka and turned towards his comrades, signaling them he would flank the enemy. 1 man, 6 rockets, 5 tanks. Vlug grinned. The odds were even. The Empire of Japan embarked on an aggressive military expansion in the early 20th century during the aftermath of World War I. Slowly but steadily, the Japanese army marched across Asia with impunity, conquering new territories in the Emperor's name. Tensions quickly rose between Japan and the United States due to the aggressive expansion. Diplomatic ties finally broke on December 7, 1941, after the unexpected attack at Pearl Harbor. Within 10 haunting hours of the destruction of Pearl Harbor, war descended upon the Philippines. The Japanese onslaught brought with it a torrent of horror among the local population. Still, Japan's grip on the Philippines faltered. Only 12 of its 48 provinces surrendered to the imperial grasp. Once a jewel in the Spanish East Indies, later under control by the American mantle after the Spanish-American War of 1898, the Philippines stood defenseless against Japan. As the European Asian colonies fell under Japan, the United States began reinforcing its military forces in this archipelago. Hong Kong, Singapore, Burma, Malaya, and the Dutch East Indies fell like domino pieces. And it was now time for the Philippines. America knew war with Japan was inevitable, and it conceived War Plan Orange in 1906 to preserve the Philippines from Japanese occupation. The plan contemplated over 40,000 servicemen in the archipelago to hold it against the Empire. However, Douglas MacArthur, Chief of Staff of the U.S. Army and Field Marshal of the Philippine Army, knew such a number would not make a difference. And he was not wrong. Dirk John Vlug was one of the thousands of young American men who joined the Army as the war in Europe escalated between 1940 and 1941. Born in August 1916 in Maple Lake, Minnesota, Vlug was not raised with a silver spoon in his mouth. He had to work hard to make a living, and in April 1941, he enlisted in the U.S. Army as an infantryman. After basic training, Vlug joined the 126th Infantry Regiment of the 32nd Infantry Division. By May 1942, he was a private first class and was dispatched to the Pacific to fight the Japanese. At this point, General MacArthur had already left the Philippines in March 1942 after the Japanese invaded the island and subjugated the American garrison. Nestled at Australia's Camp Sandy Creek, just beyond the edges of Adelaide, Vlug's 126th Cavalry Regiment was summoned for combat in September. The men embarked for Port Moresby in New Guinea, tasked with setting up an American base camp. But October thrust Vlug's regiment into the chaos of the Owen Stanley Ridges via the Kappa Kappa and Kokoda trails. They encountered not the defeated Japanese, but the unforgiving jungle heat and its dangers. During the relentless rainy season, the American GIs fought against dysentery, typhus, malaria, dengue, and trenchfoot. The Ghost Battalion descended from the mountains after a miserable 42-day ordeal. They were reduced to the spectral survivors of one of the most harrowing marches in American military history. By the time they emerged from the Kokoda Trail, the Australians had already taken care of the retreating Japanese. The indomitable 126th was granted a mere week's respite and thrust into the Battle of Bunagona. Out of the 131 officers and 3,040 enlisted personnel, a mere 32 officers and 579 enlisted individuals emerged from the battle. Vlug stood among the survivors, ready to strike the Japanese in the conquest of the Western New Guinea campaign of April 1944. The once mighty Empire of Japan was crumbling and losing power with every single island and atoll that fell under American control in the Pacific theater. It had not been easy for the U.S. Army, Navy, and Marines, but victory loomed on the horizon. In the blistering summer of 1944, the American war machine carved its path across Japanese territories. Two prongs of attack converged 300 miles southeast of Mindanao, the last bastion in the Philippines, marking the beginning of the end of Japanese dominion over the archipelago. Admiral Chester W. Nimitz led a series of island-hopping triumphs in the Central Pacific through the Gilberts, the Marshalls, and the Carolines. Simultaneously, far to the south, General Douglas MacArthur and his ground troops reclaimed the Solomons, New Guinea, and its outlying isles, severing Japanese attempts to hold Rubble. These victories, like thunderous drumbeats, echoed within the inner defensive perimeter of the Japanese Empire. American troops kept the momentum, claiming the Marianas, the Palaus, and the Morotai. With these simultaneous victories, the summer of 1944 arrived, leading to the rapid construction of American airfields in the Marianas, placing the once unreachable Japanese home islands within the crosshairs of the U.S. Army Air Forces for the first time. Yet, the unyielding Japanese soldiers and sailors, despite a string of defeats, were still defiant and ready to defend the few territories still under their control. As the Pacific Campaign neared its peak, the American military still faced the Japanese strongholds of the Philippines, Formosa, and Okinawa. On October 20th, 1944, the U.S. Navy unleashed the might of 4 Sixth Army divisions onto the shores of Leyte. As the landing crafts approached the coast to establish a beachhead, the Japanese defenders, undeterred by earlier aerial skirmishes, braced for a clash, their machine gun and artillery sights fixed upon the approaching American troops. Amidst the chaos, USS Sangamon and other vessels were damaged by Japanese retaliatory attacks, but the landings continued. The relentless spirit of General Douglas MacArthur inspired the GIs and the Filipino guerrilla after stating over the radio, quote, "People of the Philippines, I have returned. By the grace of Almighty God, our forces stand again on Philippine soil." With a heroic message echoing across the waves, the seasoned general declared his triumphant return to the Philippines, starkly contrasting his inglorious departure during the dark days of 1942. This time, a decisive defeat would send the Japanese running. To the Imperial Army commanders, Leyte was the linchpin. Its loss would unravel the rest of the Philippines. Now a battleground, the sea witnessed the brewing storm of the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the war's most challenging, largest, and multi-pronged naval battle. The ruthless and violent confrontation swiftly took form. As Vlug and his fellow infantrymen landed on Philippine soil, Japanese warships set sail in a desperate attempt to fend off the U.S. Navy with all the lethal force they could muster. Hell broke loose between attackers and defenders on the air, sea, and ground. Despite the tenacity of the Japanese, the Sixth Army advanced through enemy territory unimpeded, moving 2 miles inland and capturing the Pannon Strait. To prevent Japanese counterattacks, the 5th and 12th Cavalry Regiments and 1st Cavalry Brigade established blocking positions around Leyte, where General MacArthur had arrived to restore civil order. 1 month later, on December 15th, Vlug and his unit were guarding a roadblock in the Limon district near Ormoc City. The Japanese were in full retreat, or so they thought. Then came the roar of engines. The GIs assumed combat positions. Suddenly, 2 Japanese tanks broke out of nowhere and raced toward Vlug's position, opening fire with their main guns and machine guns. The men ducked for cover, while Vlug ran to grab a nearby bazooka and 6 rounds. Meanwhile, the Japanese tanks kept firing against the Americans. Vlug left the safety of cover and advanced alone to destroy the duo of enemy tanks. He destroyed the first tank with a single shot. The crew of the second tank scrambled out of their vehicle and rushed towards him. With a shot from his pistol, he took out an enemy. The others ran back into the tank for shelter, which Vlug quickly obliterated with a second shot. Vlug and his buddies believed the fight was over and took a deep breath. But it was only the beginning. Alerted by loud explosions and the rising plumes of smoke, 3 Japanese tanks moved up the road. Filled with adrenaline, Private Vlug reloaded his bazooka, counted his remaining .45 caliber M1911 pistol rounds, and went on the hunt for the Japanese vehicles. The brave GI flanked them, shot the first one, scoring a direct hit, and then ducked for cover before reloading. With another explosive round loaded on his shoulders, Vlug went on the offensive again, despite the hail of enemy fire. Vlug fired without hesitation, tearing apart the 4th armored vehicle. His Medal of Honor citation reads, quote, "With his last round of ammunition, Vlug struck the 5th remaining vehicle, causing it to crash down a steep embankment. Through his sustained heroism in the face of superior forces, Private First-Class Vlug alone destroyed 5 enemy tanks and greatly facilitated the successful accomplishment of his battalion's mission." 1 man, 6 rockets, and 5 tanks. That's all it took for Vlug to become a one-man army. Dirk Vlug's extreme heroism did not go unnoticed among his peers. Still, his extraordinary actions did not take him away from his ordinary duties. He remained in the Pacific until the end of the war against the Empire of Japan. Once back in the United States, Dirk Vlug returned to his hometown of Grand Rapids. A Detroit Free Press from this time perfectly encapsulates Vlug's return to civilian life, as thousands of veterans from the Greatest Generation did. The article stated, quote, "Dirk Vlug torched 5 tanks with a bazooka, walking alone up a trail in the Philippines while the Japanese blazed away. Then he came home to Grand Rapids and delivered mail." Despite his well-publicized heroics in the Pacific, Dirk Vlug remained the same young man from before the war. He said, quote, "We all told our friends and wives and sweethearts that we'd be back in a year. But we didn't get back in a year. We didn't get back for 4.5 years. While working as a mailman, Vlug received the notice of his Medal of Honor award. President Harry S. Truman presented the young veteran with the nation's highest military decoration on June 7, 1946, at a celebration in the White House. Upon returning home, Vlug's community celebrated their hero with a public ceremony. In a gesture of love, Vlug's neighbors also collected donations to help him build a home for himself and his bride. The Medal of Honor recipient joined the Michigan Army National Guard shortly after and received an honorable discharge in January 1951 with the rank of Master Sergeant. In 1999, the 79-year-old Vlug passed away and was interred in Greenwood Cemetery, Grand Rapids, Michigan. Throughout his life, the veteran rarely spoke of his heroic actions in the Philippines and died a humble and honorable man, like most men from his generation.